Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky, Andy Kamenetsky. The Lakers interviewed J.J. Redick over the weekend, but are they really in a hurry to hire anyone? That's next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers first listen of every day, Monday through Friday, no matter how or where you get your podcast. It's always free. It's never behind a paywall. And Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go to hang out with over 24,000 subscribers, all of whom, Andy, are wondering whether or not the Lakers are going to have a coach by the draft or even free agency, which is something apparently the Lakers are kicking around. Like, do we really need that, as reported by the LA Times and Dan Wojnarowski? To that point, Andy, they did. So we'll get into that. A draft, by the way, where maybe they might move up. That was reported over the weekend. Instead of trading out of the draft entirely, perhaps the Lakers are interested in trading up. So we'll try to get into that for the end of the show. But Andy, say obviously the coaching search is related to all of these things. Because the Lakers did finally sit down and talk at length to J.J. Redick, whether you want to call it his first interview, his fourth interview, his 11th interview, if you want to consider 3 interviews to equal 1 interview. So now it's a second formal interview. I don't know what the rules are, but the group, the entire basketball organization, apparently really did sit down with J.J. Redick over the weekend.
What's funny about this is, like you said, Brian, it's very difficult to know exactly where the Lakers are in this process in terms of how many different times they've spoken with J.J. Redick, how many times they've spoken with James Borrego, what constitutes a conversation.
What is an interview? What is an interview?
What constitutes a conversation or an interview with David Adelman or Micah Nori or whoever? Because it seems like they've talked to some of these guys, but they haven't been interviewed, whatever. And then in the meantime, like the only person we know that they 100% went after was Dan Hurley.
Yes.
Because we know that they actually offered him a contract. We knew that they flew Mr. and Mrs. Hurley to LA, gave him the spiel, whatever. And it also feels like that the Lakers may not be able to hire a coach until the finals ends, which is weird.
Which could be tonight. Could be tonight.
But if it's not, it feels like the longer that Dallas can stave off elimination, the longer the Lakers may go without hiring a coach, or maybe they give somebody else another interview. They all of a sudden decide they can make a last-minute Hail Mary to Jay Wright. Like, I have no idea. Maybe the whole thing has been trying to entice Coach K. Like, Coach K sees all these different people interviews, like, you know what? I could do this. I'll come out of retirement. I don't know.
It's funny in the sense that, well, actually, first, this isn't what I mean by it's funny. I just do want to let people know that today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Like, you see the note from Wojnarowski that the Lakers are potentially will not be rushed into a hire, to the point that they
clearly
but like, they will actually go into the draft. Like, there are people reportedly comfortable inside there. I wonder how many and who they are, but like people inside the organization that are reportedly comfortable with going into those things without a coach. These are really important moments in your off season, and like the idea that and so it's gone from this, like, look, it's been it's been this way the whole way. The Lakers have been, one constant has been, the Lakers will not rush. They're not going to be rushed into this process, and so on and so on and so on. But at some point, you do reach like the idea where, like, the conventional wisdom at least is you need to hire a coach and you need to do it quickly. And I think what the Lakers are trying to do is push back on the idea that this Hurley thing was a big swing that not only didn't work out because Dan Hurley didn't say yes, but didn't work out because it put them so far behind in the coaching search that now they risk, having. So they're clearly trying to sort of get rid of that perception before it takes hold, whether it's true or not, and just be like, yeah, we are going to be on our timeline. If it's before the draft, great. If it's not before the draft, fine. It just seems suboptimal to me to not have a coach in place before you do those things.
I mean, it also just seems silly to try to put that out there. Like, yes, Dan Wojnarowski's report said that there are some within the organization who think they don't necessarily have to have the coach in place before the draft and free agency. And in the most literal sense, yes, they are correct. The Lakers will be allowed to pick at 17 and 55 without a coach in place. Like, quite frankly, if Rob Pelinka got fired right before the draft and free agency, they can still participate. Like, as long as somebody calls in the draft pick, you can do all this stuff. Like, as long as somebody calls in the offer for whatever free agent, like, you can do all of these things.
Right.
But there is a reason that, broadly speaking, I think the conventional wisdom is that functional organizations have all of this stuff well in place before the draft and free agency, because there's a lot of decisions to be made. And if they're trying, by the way, also to like dispel any type of narrative or, maintain whatever leverage to like keep a coach from feeling like, ooh, you guys are going to be desperate, I can get more money off. Just, it's not believable. Like, it's not believable in terms of an organization being well run. It's believable if you're not well run. I suppose.
It's like, yes, it is better to not have a coach at the draft, like president of the draft. It's like, theoretically, that's a front office thing too. You want your coach's input or whatever. It's even better to not have a coach at the beginning of free agency than to panic and rush and feel like you might have hired the wrong guy. I understand that, and I agree that's true. The notion, though, that they couldn't get this done,
right?
Like that's something that they have
8 weeks wouldn't be enough time,
right? That the process, like, we have to honor the process and be deliberate and really making sure that we're, dotting every I and crossing every T and all that. Great, do those things, but can we pick it up? Like, there's no rule that says you have to do those things exceptionally slowly.
I mean, again, it feels like if Redick is the front runner, so much of this is just tied up with his job with the NBA Finals, which I don't need to go into the umpteenth explanation of why I find this so frustratingly stupid. That you could not have figured out a way to get the Lakers, the league, and ESPN all on the same page, so we can do this in a way that allows the Lakers to function normally, that allows JJ Redick a head start on all this, and also avoids, if you were concerned that the Lakers coaching hire would be overshadowing the finals if JJ Redick had been hired. Let me tell you something. An open vacancy at the Lakers head coaching job overshadows this a hell of a lot more.
Can we just all agree that at this point, the Lakers coaching thing has overshadowed the finals? Yes. It's not been a very good finals.
I said 3 weeks ago.
Dan Hurley, the death of Jerry West, like there was
Bill Walton
and a bad finals. It's not been a good finals.
No.
So,
but I'm just saying, like, it. Again, this may all work out, and if Boston wins tonight, Lakers may end up having a coach hired on Tuesday. I have no idea. It just seems, putting aside the idea that, like, finding the through line between Dan Hurley, JJ Redick, and James Borrego is difficult. They
are all three guys who theoretically are creative and innovative offensive coaches.
Okay. It's
young-ish.
It just male. It all just seems like, as always, the Lakers never make this easy. They just never make it easy.
There's an interesting question about this notion of a first-time coach, first-time head coach, first-time, all that stuff, and some people weighing in on that. Interesting writing about that. Interesting people weighing in on that, and it's a question where. I wonder, what the answer is really dependent on. So we'll get into it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by LinkedIn, and when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals right for the role. That's why you got to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your job faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They got a vast network of over 1 billion professionals, making it the best place to hire. It gives you access to professionals you can't find anywhere else. LinkedIn does it all while making the process easy, intuitive. Hiring becomes so much easier when you have that many qualified and quality candidates. So easy, in fact, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn understands that when you're running a small business, you're wearing many hats at once, and you may not have the time or the resources for the process of hiring. And that's why LinkedIn keeps finding different ways to make that process easier. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring for a reason. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This question of, the Lakers are talking to really one guy with coaching experience. That's Borrego. Head coaching experience, I should say. Everyone else who's a perceived as a front end candidate for this job is either a first time head coach or a first time coach. In the case of Redick, which obviously most people at this point are familiar with. So it really is worth getting into this question of whether or not that is problematic. And so a lot of people are weighing in. Including former Laker Larry Nance. He was speaking to FanDuel TV's Run It Back show. Says, personally, I think a first-time head coach is not the answer. The LA market is really hard if you've never dealt with something like that before. Obviously, you miss a shot, you're the next to fill in the blank. You miss a shot, you should never have picked up a basketball in your life. It's tough. I think you probably need an established coach, but I can't necessarily put a name out there for that. You need someone with clout. Which, by the way, first-time head coach in the NBA, but this is what they were going for with Hurley. Like, when you hear a comment like that, like you need somebody with clout, okay, well, that's Dan Hurley. And so they don't have that option anymore, it seems like. And I know there was more stuff. Brad Turner from the Times talked to Vinny Del Negro, Derek Fisher, Mark Jackson, Steve Kerr, Doc Rivers about their experience as first-time head coaches. And when you ask that question, Andy, what is the answer? Like, who is the answer more dependent? Like, what goes into answering that question of, is it a good idea? Is it, can a first-time head coach be successful with the Lakers? Is this the right gig for that?
First of all, it's worth noting, too, that Larry Nance Jr.'s perspective on this comes having been coached with the Lakers by Luke Walton, who was a first-time head coach. So this isn't pure speculation by
He
Larry
even came
Nance.
with more experience than most first, because he at least got that season as a,
Golden State
interim guy.
Yeah. So Nance is at least, it's interesting because Nance isn't just purely speculating about what it is like, with the Lakers, with that spotlight, whatever. Like, he has literally done the thing that he's talking about. I looked up some of the numbers for the first time coaches, the ones that Brad Turner from the LA Times spoke with. And I thought it was interesting. Mark Jackson, his first season with the Warriors, they won just 23 games. It was in a 67 game lockout season, but it's a weird year. Steph missed a ton of games. There was that Steph Curry, Monte Ellis weirdness about how to structure the team. Klay Thompson was just a rookie. But the following season, they won 47 games. And the season after that, 51. So Mark Jackson got the Warriors on the right track pretty quickly. And then Steve Kerr obviously took over that 51-win team and immediately won a championship. Doc Rivers, when his first season in Orlando, the team that he took over had won. They'd been 16 games above 500 in the lockout shortened season. And then his first year, they went down winning percentage-wise to 41-41. But that was also his best scorers that year were Darrell Armstrong and Ron Mercer. So respectfully to those guys, 500 teams sounds like Doc did his job pretty well. Vinny Del Negro in his first season with the Bulls, They went from 33 wins to 41. Derek Fisher is the only of these guys that BT spoke with that really had a disastrous first and only time coaching with the Knicks. So one of the things that I look at is I think a lot of this depends on if it's Redick, do the Lakers have concrete, tangible reasons that they believe Redick is the right choice? Like, you have to know why you're choosing the guy in the first place, but also too, and this is something we've talked about a lot, Brian, it comes down to, are you keeping the expectations and the patience level and the support system good? Like, if you give JJ Redick reasonable expectations and you grade him based on the job that he actually did, then he might be able to prove himself to be the right hire for this situation. If you hold him to a standard of you're either winning a championship or your seat's warm, he's not going to succeed, but likely nobody else will either, right? Because this team is not immediately in a position reasonably to win a championship.
No. Yeah, I mean, you compete, have a good record if guys are healthy, but no, they are not, certainly not as currently constructed or adjacent to as currently constructed. They're not going to enter this season upcoming as as a prohibitive favorite in the West. Dark horse candidate, if everything breaks well, maybe they're the team that jumps up and surprise, whatever. But no, nobody's going to pick them to win a title. And like your answer is very similar to mine. It's like, I don't think the answer to that question of can a first-year head coach succeed is really about the coach. Obviously, the coach matters. And Darvin, I don't want to say Darvin didn't have the stuff to be a coach in LA. I'm not wholly, he was very successful in his first year.
Second year, he did seem to start getting pretty put off by the idea of Laker fans getting pretty nuts win to win, which is something he should know.
He should, but I think those problems would have manifest in a lot of cities. I think any city, assuming the team was trying to win, had high expectations, then that reaction isn't going to play any better. And stop treating everything, living and dying by every game. That's not going to play well in Philly either. That's not going to play well in.
I definitely wouldn't try it in Philly.
No, Boston. That's not going to cut. None of these cities, smaller profile cities than LA. So Darvin's problems, I don't think were necessarily specific to LA. Maybe specific to expectations, but Lakers fans certainly know and is competitive as they are not the only team in the league with expectations. The answer is it's up to the Lakers whether or not a first-year or first-time head coach can succeed. I do think, though, this is why it is when you hear somebody like Larry Nance say you need someone with clout, it's going to be hard to find. JJ Redick, I think, may be respected. I think but he does not have clout. And this is why if you're going to hire Redick, you need to put him at the front of the line, make sure everybody's comfortable with him, and don't make the perception seem like he's a third or a fourth choice, wherever. Every step you go down the line with Redick, where you start, they interviewed him this weekend. If they stop and interview 4 other people and then come back and have second interviews, every step you create with Redick that he is not now your first choice undercuts that kind of credibility and whatever clout and cachet that he might have with this locker room. And you just make that with the media, with all these people who are the advantage to Hurley. And I 1,000% understand why the Lakers wanted to make this play, is that nobody's going to question why the Lakers went out. Nobody's going to question whether or not the Lakers are going to fire him. Nobody's going to question who wins in a power struggle between player X and Dan Hurley. He had clout, and the Lakers through this process need to make sure that they're not so deliberate that they actually end up undercutting the person that they're trying to empower.
Yeah, especially after all the leaks about JJ Redick having the Pat Riley vibes, you then go out and make a pretty deliberate offer, or a pretty deliberate attempt, I should say. We both don't think the offer was high enough, but they clearly wanted Dan Hurley,
which real thing.
which is fine. I mean, it is fine if JJ Redick is the second choice. What it can't be is JJ Redick is the second choice held to a completely different and lower threshold of standard than Dan Hurley. That will not work. And that won't work whether it's David Adelman, whether it's James Borrego, Micah Nori, Sam Cassell, whoever. Like, you have to treat these guys like they matter and that you want them there and that you are willing to ride out a process with whoever it is. Otherwise, you're just going to stay on this merry-go-round.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the draft, because interesting report from Jake Fisher at Yahoo about what the Lakers might do, because they're not encumbered by having a coach weigh in this process. I'll get to it next.
Locked On Lakers is brought to you by PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app with over 3 million members. The easiest, most exciting way to play DFS. It's just you against the numbers. Pick more than or less than on 2 or more player stat projections and watch those winnings roll in. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as four correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000, $1,000 with basketball and hockey entries today on PrizePicks. Again, America's #1 sports app. When the finals end, hoops action does not. Women's basketball is just getting started. Young stars like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese. Veterans like Asia Wilson and Breanna Stewart. Again, win up to 100 times your money as those ladies do their thing. PrizePicks now offers Apple Pay for quick and easy deposits into your account. You can make your picks, submit the entries in less than 60 seconds. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
So the expectation, Andy, from a lot of people is that the Lakers, would use this pick, essentially trade out of the draft, draft on behalf of somebody else, trade the pick in pursuit of a star. I've seen at least some murmurings around that, like maybe they would trade down to try to get additional draft capital, additional assets. It is a middle-loaded draft, I think is fair to say. There's most of the stuff I read, and not that I've been scouting these people, and Andy and I, as we tell people, are not college basketball people. We are not scouts, but we read and we aggregate basically what other people are doing.
And we will, by the way, bring on some draft people onto the show.
Absolutely, no question. There's seen like a very little. It's not a great year to be in the top 5, but it's not a terrible year to be in the 10 through 20 range, because there just isn't that much difference this year between 5 and 25. Some years that gap is huge. Other years it's smaller, and there's just not a lot of agreement on who goes where on a draft board. So 17 for a team like the Lakers is actually not terrible, because you might be, if you scout right and pick right, you actually might be able to find somebody. So I've seen the Lakers, the idea is the Lakers might move back, get a little extra draft capital because they don't have much of it. But now this weekend, Andy, a report that they might move up from Jake Fisher, try to pull out essentially kind of what Dallas did with Derek Lively. Maybe you're not picking up to 4, but you're moving from 17 to 13, 17 to 12. I am certainly intrigued by this idea.
They need to find some cost-controlled players. You're going to need some guys that both are under cost control and that you can help develop for a longer window. There's a real logic to keeping that pick, especially I think also too, we've seen how many teams have been regretting the idea of being so top loaded with players who are, late 20s, early 30s or higher. Your window just becomes so much tighter with that type of alignment.
It's, I think there's obviously the contrast between last year and this year. Are the Lakers going to go after somebody who is NBA ready versus Jalen Hood-Schifino, who I think obviously didn't perform at the level that they expected, but I don't think anybody like in the organization was like, he's a guy who can come in and play real minutes for us next year. I don't think there was that expectation. I get why. Both of us thought it was a mistake at the time to not go after somebody more NBA ready, and it turns out we and others who who thought that were right.
I don't know if we necessarily thought it was a mistake. We were very surprised they didn't do it.
I think we both thought of it as a risk. We
definitely thought it was a risk.
Team that where you have so many guys who, are injured a lot, that the importance of having a 13th guy or 12th guy or 10th guy, 11th guy on this roster this year who could play was more of now. The guys who stayed healthy turned out to be the stars, and they needed the other dudes that were the ones who were falling apart. But the point being, like, it would have been helpful if Jalen Hood-Schifino was more NBA ready this year. Really would have come in handy. That's where the risk of that was what we were pointing out. There is a version of the world where Hood-Schifino would never have played because everybody. Same holds true in Miami with Jaime Jaquez. Same holds true in Golden State with Pajemski.
Oh, they did. So, Golden State, they did not begin the season expecting him to have the role that he did. Not at all.
Nor Miami. Miami wasn't going to play Jaquez like that until everybody got hurt. So, but I think then we're also thinking we might want guys who are more NBA ready. Jaquez is comes out of like a 3D printer out of Pat Riley's office as somebody who is designed to play for the Miami Heat. I think this year they won't do that again. I think this year they will find a player who is more NBA ready. And your chances of finding that are higher at 12 than they are at 17. They're higher at 13 than they are 17. It's not a guarantee either way. But I find that interesting. And the idea that you would, instead of trading that pick for something else that is more NBA ready, you might use probably relatively limited assets. Like probably wouldn't need to do a ton this year to go from 17 to 14, 13, 12, just because the draft is so mid, as the kids would say. I kind of like the tactic. It's sort of a low, if I'm correct about reading the market that way.
Well, I mean, the other thing too is the Lakers, the strongest part of their organization has been their scouting department. Like, that's really been, I think, the most unquestioned strength in terms of the different departments of the Lakers. Yes, Jalen Hood-Schifino may end up being a mistake, but frankly, as both of us have reminded a lot, we have not seen enough to make that assessment one way or the other. Like, I don't think it is fair to JHS, and I don't think it's fair to the organization to already write him off as a bust. It's unfair, but I also think there's just not enough information. But especially when you look at the recent draft picks where it felt like, in the 20s or, maybe the top of the second round, they were looking for guys who could be ready to play right away. The track record is pretty good. Kyle Kuzma was a guy ready to play in the NBA right away. Josh Hart was very ready to play right away. Larry Nance Jr. was very ready to play right away. Jordan Clarkson, once he got an opportunity to play, and that was a guy that they actually bought the draft pick specifically to draft him, was ready to play right away as a rookie, and yes, I understand that those teams weren't necessarily contending teams, but you can tell if somebody's ready or not. And those guys were all ready.
Yeah, and it's a matter of sacrificing some ceiling, I think, is what this comes down to. Because when you draft a guy, these players do tend to be older. If you find a guy who's 19 and NBA ready, you are not getting them at 17, 16, 15, 14,
well,
13,
Derek
12.
Lively. Derek Lively.
Generally speaking, you're not. They are more the exception to the rule. I think it's fair to say, like, those guys. Like, I think Lively's impact was a little bit of a surprise this year, and some of it is system, some of it is opportunity, some of it is who you're playing next to, and what are you being asked to do. And it seems like Dallas really deployed Lively smartly, and also has put him around. They picked up Gafford. They've done a really good job this year. So you're right. Yes, it can happen.
Well, I'm just pointing it out because we began the conversation talking about Derek Lively, and he was one of those guys.
No, you're right. You're right. It can happen, but generally speaking, a 19-year-old who everyone agrees can step in and play for you in his rookie season and be, on a good team, is not going to be somebody who's available middle of the draft.
That's generally LeBron, That's generally LeBron, Melo, those type of players.
Right. You see that talent and people jump at it faster. And so the players that you're talking about, like, I don't think Jaquez is going to be a star in this league. I think he's going to be kind of a better version of what he is now, like a really good player, but a role player, never an all-star, whatever. I think Pajemski is kind of the same. Like, these guys, like, maybe you see him progressing a little bit more. Nance, effective player, not going to be an all-star. Like, Josh Hart, effective player, not going to be, but they're really useful. And they're particularly useful on good teams where you don't need them to be a star. So if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of ceiling, then you're good to go. And I do agree with you about Hood-Schifino. It is way too early to call him a bust.
Yeah, it's just, I don't think that's fair to anybody involved. That being said, it's very important that Jalen Hood-Schifino has a good season.
Locked On Lakers on YouTube is where you can go hang out with over 34,000 subscribers. We will be watching this head coaching search with great interest and, TikTok, y'all. Leave us questions, leave us comments. We'll see everyone tomorrow.